Today I'd like to go over the components of a pre-trip inspection. Starting with the vehicle overview, the components include checking the pass-along, visually looking at the overall condition of the apparatus, specifically for damage, checking for fluids on the ground, fluid leaks, and an exterior check of all equipment to make sure it's secure. Following the vehicle overview, a quick check inside the cab includes a scan of the general interior, scanning the panel with the ignition off and locating the oil pressure gauge, the voltmeter, the amp meter, the air tank gauges, the water temperature, transmission temperature, fuel restriction, air restriction, and tachometer. We'll want to note the location of our auxiliary braking systems. Depending upon your vehicle's manufacturer and technology, you'll be equipped with either a Jacobs engine brake, it might be labeled exhaust brake, or a transmission retarder. Next, we'll need to locate our battery voltage gauge, also known as the NUMAR gauge. That is for the condition of your vehicle batteries, your radio batteries, and your MDC batteries. After a quick check inside the cab, turn the battery switch on and scan the panel with the ignition on. Check all your gauges, your warning lights, and your warning buzzers. After exiting the cab doing my quick check, I'm going to start my pre-trip at the left front tire, starting with the center of the hub and the axle seal. I'm going to look for the general condition. I'm going to check for damage and cracks, leaks, and the oil level within the hub. They're filled with 90 weight gear oil. Next, I'm going to work my way out from the center of the hub, and I'm going to check the lug nuts for the general condition, damage or loose, rust or corrosion. From the lug nuts, I'm going to move to the rim and check the general condition, check for damage and cracks, rust and corrosion. From the rims, I'm going to move up to the tires. I'm going to check for damage, cracks, and wear. I'm going to check the valve stems, make sure they're not loose, they're not damaged, and the caps are in place. I'm going to check for proper tire inflation. I'm going to measure the tread depth. For the front steer axle, the minimum tread depth is 4 30-seconds, and for the rear, it'll be 2 30-seconds. And on the rears, when I get to the rears, I'm also going to look at the space between the duals. Next, I'm going to move up to the doors. I'm going to look at the general condition. I'm going to check for damage, broken or loose items. I'm going to close the door and make sure it latches securely, and the hinges are tight, and the door seals are intact. From the doors, I'm going to move up to the mirrors. I'm going to look for the general condition. I'm going to check to make sure that there's no damage, there's no cracks, or any loose or missing items. The glass is clean and unobstructed, and the mounting bracket is secure. I'm going to move up to the windows. I'm going to look for the general condition. I'm going to look for damaged, cracked, loose, or missing items. Make sure the glass is clean and unobstructed, and make sure that they're operational. They roll up and down freely. From the top of the door, I'm going to look up. I'm going to check my flood and spotlights for their general condition. Make sure there's no damaged, loose, or missing items. The glass is clean and unobstructed, and that they're operational when I do my operational light check. Once I complete the driver's side, I'm going to move to the front of the apparatus, and I'm going to look at the windshield. I'm going to make sure that it's clean and unobstructed and has no cracks. Next, I'll check the windshield wipers and the washers for their general condition, their operation, and the fluid level. Now I'm going to move from the front of the apparatus to the captain's side. And as I go down the side, I'm going to check the compartment doors, make sure there's no damage, loose or missing items, that all the doors latch and are secure. As I go down the side, I'm going to check the exterior equipment. I'm going to look for damaged, loose, or missing items, make sure they're all latched and secured in place. As I go around the rig, I need to note the location of the emergency equipment, which include the road flares, your fire extinguishers, and make sure they're fully charged, your road reflective triangles, and your road cones. As I move around to the back, I'm going to kneel down and look at the fuel tank. I'm looking for damage. I'm making sure that it's mounted securely, and I'm looking for signs of fuel leaks. While I'm looking at the fuel tank, I'll note the condition of the mud flaps. I'm looking for damaged, torn, or missing, and make sure that they're mounted securely. As I complete my walk around and check all 4 sides of the apparatus, the next step is to do an engine compartment check. For apparatus that have a non-tilt cab, this is when we open up the doors and then expose the engine compartment. For apparatus that have a tilt cab, this is when we turn the battery switch on and we tilt the cab. I'm going to use a front to back flow pattern through the engine compartment doing my compartment checks. I'm going to start at the radiator towards the front, and I'm going to check the condition of the fan blades. I'm going to look for any that are loose, cracked, missing, or damaged. Also, I'm going to look at the fins on the radiator to make sure they're not obstructed, bent, damaged, or stained from possible leaks. Next, I'm going to check the radiator cap. I'm going to look for obvious signs of leaks. I'm going to check for damage in the cap or anything that's missing and the general overall condition. I'm going to inspect the filler neck of the radiator. I'm going to look for signs of leaks, signs of cracks, which might include some staining. Also, I'm going to look at the radiator's top section and bottom section, these seams. I'm going to look for leaks and signs of leaks, which would include staining. Next, I'm going to move back through the engine and I'm going to look at the belts and hoses. I'm going to look at the fan belts for wear and tension. I'm going to look at the power steering belts for wear and tension, the alternator belts, the air compressor belts, the air conditioner belts for wear and tension, the coolant hoses, the power steering hoses, the air compressor hoses for their condition and leaks, and the air conditioner hoses for their condition and leaks. As we move through the engine compartment, we'll need to note the condition of the electrical wiring and their connections to the vehicle sensors. Next, we'll need to check the oil level. We'll note its color and if there's any odor. And then we'll check for fuel contamination, water contamination, and possibly metallic shavings. I'm going to check the engine coolant for its color and possible contamination. I'm going to check the power steering fluid for its level and check the transmission oil for the color and odor. And this check will be done twice, with the engine off and with the engine running at normal operating temperatures. Visually inspecting the engine for possible signs of leaks, which include air leaks, fluid leaks, or exhaust leaks. As I work my way out of the engine, I'm going to note the condition of the frame and cross members for their general condition, for damage, cracks, or broken welds, signs of rust or corrosion. As I move to the rear of the engine, I'm going to note the general condition of the drive shaft. I'm looking for damage, any cracks, or anything that's bent, and the condition of the U-joints. I'm going to note the general condition of the exhaust system. I'm looking for any damage, which might include some dents. Make sure it's mounted securely, and there's no visual cracks or any signs of any exhaust leaks. On a tilt cab apparatus, it's easy to see the batteries are mounted right along the frame rail. On a non-tilt cab, this is when you have to open up the battery box and check the condition of the batteries. We're looking for the general overall condition. We're looking for damage. We're making sure the battery and the cover are secure. connections are tight, any obvious signs of leaks, any unusual corrosion, the fluid level is correct, the caps are tight, and none are missing. Next, we're going to look at the general condition of the air cans, and we're looking for damage, leaks, and we're checking the mounting brackets. Next, we're going to check the overall condition of the brake lines. We're looking for damage, cracks, or wear, and any obvious signs of leaks. From the brake lines, we're going to move to the general condition of the brake drum. We're looking at its general condition, obvious cracks, and any unusual wear. Next, we're going to check the general condition of the brake lining. We're looking for damage, cracks, or any unusual wear, and we're going to note the brake pad thickness. Once we've completed the inspection of the components of the braking system, I'm going to move to the components of the suspension system, starting with the general condition of the springs and the spring hangers. I'm looking for damage, any obvious signs of cracks, or anything that's broken. Also the condition of the U-bolts. Next, I'm going to check the general condition of the spring mounts. I'm looking for damage, any cracks, anything broke, anything loose, and that the bushings are all in place and intact. Next, I'm going to check the general condition of the shock absorber. I'm looking for anything that's damaged, broken, or loose. The bushings are intact and no obvious leaks. Next, I'm going to check the general condition of the steering components. I'm looking for anything that's damaged, broken, or loose, any obvious signs of leaks, specifically the steering box hoses, the steering box housing, and then I'm going to check the linkage to make sure there's nothing damaged, bent, loose, or broken. Once I complete the overall inspection of the engine compartment, I'm going to lower the cab and close the engine compartment doors. Once the engine compartment check is complete, I'm going to enter the cab and I'm going to check the condition of the seats and seat belts. I'm looking for any unusual damage or wear. The mounting brackets are secure and they're all operational. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and start up the engine with the parking brake set, the transmission in neutral, my foot on the brake pedal. I'm going to use both starter buttons if so equipped. Once I've started it, I'm going to scan the panel with the engine running. I'm going to note my oil pressure, that's the first gauge I want to check, my voltmeter, my amp meter, my air tanks, my water temperature, my transmission temperature, my fuel restriction gauge, my air filter restriction, and my tachometer. With the engine running, I'm going to check the free play in the steering wheel. You want about less than 2 inches of free play or 10 degrees. With the engine running and warming up, I'm going to check the heater. I'm going to turn the heater on, make sure the fan all works properly, and the defrosters work properly. Next, I'm going to check my horns. I'm going to check my electric horn and my air horn. Next, I'm going to look out both my windows and check my mirrors to make sure that they're clean and unobstructed and adjusted properly prior to travel. Next, from the inside of the cab, I'm going to scan my dash panel for the lights. I want to make sure that my turn signal indicators work properly, my emergency four-way flashers indicators work properly, my headlights on indicator works properly, my low beam and high beam. With somebody outside the apparatus helping you, they can assist you with your brake light checks, your backup lights check, a walk around. You can pick up your clearance lights, your alley lights, your floodlights, your pickup lights, your license plate light, and all your reflectors are in place. Next, I'm going to check my code 3 lighting equipment. I'm going to check for my rotating reds, my flashing reds, my steady burning red, and my rear ambers. After I've completed my code 3 lights, I'm going to check my sirens, which include the EQ2B, if so equipped, floor switch, and the toggle switch on the unitrol. After completing all my Code 3 lighting, and the engine's been running a while, air tank's fully charged, this is a good point to start your air system brake check to complete your pre-trip inspection. The performance of the air brake system check include these components. Part 1, the static test. Part 2, the applied air test. Part 3, test the low pressure warning signal. Part 4, test the emergency spring brake activation. Part 5, check the rate of air pressure buildup. Part 6, check the governor cut-out pressure. Part 7, check the governor cut-in pressure. Part 8, check the slack adjusters or the wear pin indicators. Part 9, test the parking brakes. Part 10, test the service brakes. Part 1, the static test. Step 1, on level ground, chalk the vehicle. With basically a fully charged air system, above 120 in most applications, turn off the engine and release the brakes. You'll want to note if you have a greater than 2 psi loss in 1 minute. Note, in some applications, apparatus equipped with electronic gauges, you will need to leave the battery switch on. Part 2, the applied air test. You want to start with the air system charged above 100 psi. With the engine off, the parking brakes off, the next step is to apply the service brakes with normal application pressure. You will want to note if you have a greater than 3 psi loss in 1 minute. Part 3. With the battery switch on, the ignition switch on, this is the point where we pump the brake pedal to bring our air pressure down, and we're checking to see that the warning signals, both audio and visual signals, come on between the range of 55 and 75 psi. Part 4, test emergency spring brakes. At this point, we continue pumping the brake pedal to reduce the air pressure. The spring brakes should activate when they fall between 20 and 45 psi. Part 5, check the rate of air pressure buildup. At this point, we start the engine. To build up tank pressure, we want to switch to high idle. We want to note that the tank pressure fills from 85 psi to 100 psi within 45 seconds in most applications. Step 6. Check governor cutout pressure. To perform this test, the air pressure for the vehicle must be rising when the engine is running. Run the engine at a fast idle. The air compressor governor must cut out prior to the needle reaching 130 psi, typically above 120 in most applications. Note, as air pressure builds up, you will hear the air dryer cycle. Step 7. Check governor cut-in pressure. To perform this test, the air pressure for the vehicle cannot be rising when the engine is running. With the engine idling, slowly pump the brake pedal to reduce the air tank pressure. Watch the air pressure gauge between pumps to identify when the compressor cuts in. You'll note the needle start to rise. This should occur no lower than 85 psi. Allow pressure to build up and end with a fully charged air brake system. Step 8. The following video will demonstrate the proper procedure for measuring the slack adjusters. With the vehicle chalked and the engine off, release the parking brakes. At this point, we'll need to get somebody in the cab to apply the brake pedal to assist with the test. Depending upon the technology of your fire apparatus, we'll either be making slack adjustment measurements or wear pin indicator measurements. The first step is to take a measurement with the brakes released from the back of the air can to the center of the clevis pin. The next step is to ask for a brake application and take that measurement. And then the next step would be to compute the travel distance to see that it's not greater than 2 inches. Note, typically at 1 3/4 a VRR would be produced to the Fleet Services section. When the slack adjustment measurement exceeds 2 inches, this is near out of service criteria. Consult the Fleet Services section depending on the technology of your fire apparatus. The next video will demonstrate the proper procedures for measurements of the wear pin indicators. With the vehicle chalked and the engine off, parking brakes released, we need to measure the distance that the wear pin indicator protrudes from the backing plate and note that on our documentation. In most applications, when the wear pin indicator moves inwards towards the backing plate and becomes flush, this is when you have approximately 2 weeks of service life on your brake pads. Step 9. Test the parking brakes. With your seatbelt worn properly, ensure the MAXI brakes are set. Place the transmission in drive. We want to try moving the vehicle at 1,000 RPM max. Step 10. We're going to test the service brakes. Release the parking brakes. Move the vehicle forward at 5 miles per hour maximum, and then apply the brake pedal firmly. After completion of your air system brake check, and while on the creeper underneath the apparatus, this is a good point to complete your undercarriage inspection, and finish up with a quick check of the top of the apparatus. What I've done for you today is to demonstrate my sequence and procedure for conducting a pre-trip inspection. However, while you need to cover these steps in conducting a pre-trip inspection, they don't necessarily have to be done in this order.